Hi everybody and welcome to my Spring 2025 Personal Curriculum Wrap-Up video. I thought I'd take you through what I have learnt during October and November, how it all went, what worked, what didn't work, what I dropped and what I added to my curriculum along the way. Okay, first of all, we'll start over here, is I wanted to learn about life in Regency High Society after watching the latest series of Bridgerton. So I was reading this book. I really enjoyed this. And I was actually surprised about a few things. I always presumed that, I don't know where I got this idea from, but I always presumed that that basically it was only certain mothers who were pressuring their daughters to basically find the most eligible bachelor to marry a duke and, better the family's standing in society. I didn't realise that pretty much it was across the board. All high society families were trying to marry off their daughters. So that was actually very interesting. And learning about the pressure that these poor girls were, that was put upon them. That was actually very interesting. And another thing that I was intrigued about too, I always assumed that the men, that being a gentleman meant that the males could pretty much do what they wanted. And it was only the females in the family who had to live by the huge restraints to their life. And I learned that this actually wasn't so. If you were the eldest son of a gentleman and you stood to inherit the wealth and land, you were okay. You had the power and the money to pretty much do as you pleased. Yes, there was a pressure on what you had to do, but you had more freedoms. I always assumed that the eldest son, or the father, if he was still alive, that he would actually financially support the younger men in the family, the younger sons. But no, they pretty much have to secure their own financial future, which isn't easy, because I learnt that they actually have a lot of constraints on them as well. Because though they need to earn money, because of their status as a gentleman, they can never be in a position of being paid for a job, as this was seen beneath them. So what were they supposed to do? The answer was, and I'm probably going to butcher this term, the answer was to have an honorarium. They could have a career either in the clergy, become an officer in the military, or practice as a barrister or physician. They either trained or bought a commission, and they were paid a wage. They weren't paid a wage, sorry, as this wasn't allowed, but instead they were given an honorarium, which was a payment offered in recognition of them lending out their time on the job. Really, it's just semantics. I mean, they were pretty much getting paid. If they did anything at all, they pretty much paid for what they were doing. A lot of them, I don't think they even did a lot. From what I could gather, it was just more they needed something, and I think that a lot of companies or priesthoods or physicians, doctory, medical professionals, they probably liked the idea of having a duke, a duke's younger son basically as working for them, or being tied to them. So it was a rise in status for the priesthood and the area of which they worked. So I thought that was very interesting how the younger sons, they were actually really constrained on what they could do. I also learned a lot about the women, the young girls, and how they were so limited on what they could do as well. Basically, all the activities that they had to learn were restricted to those that would help them become a good wife and a mother in the future. They were not allowed to challenge their husband intellectually, even if they were more intelligent than their husbands. They had to pretty much just be quiet and toe the line and be the pretty little wife and just, yeah, do be seen more than heard, pretty much. They needed to be fluent in languages. They needed to have beautiful penmanship. And they needed to read, be able to read, but they were pretty much forced to read certain things. Like they were constricted pretty much in what they could read. It had to be to do with being a better wife and a better mother. And they had to learn basic philosophy and politics, but they weren't allowed to have any opinions on philosophy and politics. They had to be able to talk about it, but in a way that they weren't too knowledgeable, because that would offend the males in the room. They needed to do needlework, music, so that they could entertain their guests. So anyway, that's just a brief overview, but that was the most interesting things that I learnt about that. So that was learning about life in Regency high society. And the reason that I wanted to learn about that is I thought my goal was to learn about it, obviously, and to think about how I would have coped in that sort of environment. With all the restrictions and being forced to dress up and learn all these things you don't want to learn, and basically go to the marriage mart and try and impress a duke or whoever, the most senior, most eligible man that was there, and basically try and lure him in and marry him, regardless of what he was like personally. It was just all about his title. So yeah, it was very interesting to learn about that. And I've been thinking a lot about how I would have coped if I was born into a family in the Regency high society. In the high society in the Regency era of Britain, of England. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and considering that I was what my family would have, in a more positive light, called me a bit of a rebel. I did things my way. I went against what they expected, what they demanded, and I pretty much lived my life on my rules, and that didn't bode well for them. So suffice to say, if I had lived in the high society of the Regency era, I pretty much would have, not done what was supposed to have, I would not have done what would have been expected of me in that period either. Knowing me, I would have pretty much done everything I could not to probably attract a guy, because I would have refused to be married off to someone I didn't love. And knowing me, I probably would have fallen in love with a servant or someone like that, and probably would have run away and married off in secret, just to, I wouldn't have liked to have been controlled by society or controlled by my family and forced to marry someone I didn't want to spend that I didn't love and who I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with. So that was actually very interesting, but that's how I researched, and what was why I chose this topic. So that was quite interesting. So I also read a lot about fashion in the time of Jane Austen, which was this time period, and this is a book that I got from the library that they actually gave away. It was an old book, falling apart, so they gave it away, so I pretty much read through it and used it for the pictures and learned about the clothing. Yes, and would I have liked to have changed clothing, I don't know, 8 times a day for every different activity that I would have done? No, that would have driven me insane as well. But it was very interesting actually to learn about why all the morning dresses and I think there was, I can't remember now, 4 different types of dress, and why you weren't allowed to wear certain things, and yeah, very interesting. Anyway, so all of that research and my daily journaling was done in this journal, which I thought was quite fitting, and then the end of it was done in this one as well. So from there, so I love this subject, I had a lot of fun with it, and I successfully completed that. From there, I remember on Bridgerton, one of the sons went on a grand tour of Europe. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, okay, let's look into the grand tour and how it is different to the OE, the overseas experience, or what the Brits call the gap year. I'm not quite sure what you Americans call it. Basically, it's when you finish university, instead of going into a job, you basically go overseas, live overseas for several years, and you go travelling and you work a bit. Here in New Zealand, it's called the OE, the overseas experience, and we usually go to England for 3 years in our late, pretty much after university, so early 20s, late teens, early 20s. Live for at least 3 years and travel around Europe, and we might even live in Europe as well. So I have been reading this book, which is The Grand Tours and Cook's Tours, A History of Leisure Travel from the 1750s to the 1915s by Lynn Withy. Really enjoyed this too. I've only just started it because, as you'll see, I've been jumping from subject to subject and I've been all over the place. So really interested in learning about that. So I'm still continuing on with that. Then we moved to the, sorry about the glare, the Halloween-ish subjects. And I wanted to, this is the journal that I used. This was from Temu. And I wanted to learn about witches. Now, I started off by reading this book, which is about The Once and Future Witch Hunt by Alice Markham Cantor. And this is about, basically Alice went and researched about her descendant who was basically killed in the Salem witch trials. And what I loved about this is how it was written. Obviously it was all the information I learned as well, but how it was written, every couple of chapters, how she wrote about her descendant and what she went through was written as a story in fiction. So it was fictionalized, and that was I really loved that. And then in between those chapters, the author wrote about the research and how she felt about what she'd found out and all that sort of stuff. So the way it was written, I actually really enjoyed it. So finished that, learned a lot about what was the trigger that caused basically the witch trials in Salem. Okay. And then finally I got this book out. I was waiting for this, so it's taken a while to get to me. Other people had it before me. And I've been dipping in and out of various books on the history of witches, but this is by far the best. The Witches' Almanac, Sorcerers, Witches, and Magic from Ancient Rome to the Digital Age. This is fantastic. This is thorough. This covers pretty much everything. Because I got this book so late, I haven't finished this, but what have I done? I have started off with a timeline of witchcraft starting from 10,000 BCE, going straight through. I thought I'd give you a quick flip through of my journal as we go. And I started off right at the beginning. Started off learning about Egyptian magic, Chinese magic, witchcraft in ancient Greece. And this included all about the goddesses, witchcraft in ancient Rome, the Bible and witchcraft, the legacy of the Greek and the Roman witch, and how that still influences how we see witches today. Very interesting. Obviously, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I'd be here all day, and if you're not into witches, you'll be bored stupid, but love this. So interesting. And then we went into witchcraft in the Middle Ages. Then I went off on a total tangent and did voodoo. And then the Renaissance, when everything changed. And what was interesting was, for most of this period, up until the Renaissance period, people that were involved in did magical stuff, sorcery, it was tolerated. Officials knew about it. They thought the people who were doing it were a bit nutty, but there were no laws. People weren't arrested. The church knew about it. The church thought people were just pretty much off their rocker, but they tolerated it. They ignored it. No one was harmed, killed. The local people just thought you were a bit crazy, but it was tolerated. It was in the Renaissance, that is when everything changed. That is when, basically, that was the start of the beginning of, basically, the church, and various other things happened that got involved, and things changed dramatically. And I'm still reading about this now. Yes. So that was very interesting. So I'm only up to the Renaissance. From then on, I've read a lot about the burning times and the witch trials. So a lot of this I don't need to read. I've learned a lot about the cunning folk. So it's pretty much after the witch trials and onwards to modern time. That's what I've still got to read about. So this is still in progress. What I did learn about, actually, we'll put this here so you've got something to look at, is the cause of the witch trials. I'm probably going to butcher this, in the Malleus Maleficarum, which is the Hammer of the Witches. This is the witch-finding manual that a guy called Heinrich, I don't think I've got his, no I don't, I can't remember his last name. He basically wrote it up. And pretty much he was anti-woman. And this was the basis of the witch trials, and I'll read it out to you. Heinrich explained that every evil is small compared to the evil of woman. Women are defective in all powers of both soul and body, noting that an evil woman is more carnal than a man, lying in speech and unwilling to be ruled. Basically, this book, this Malleus Maleficarum, was a compendium of false logic, cruelty, sorry, I'm probably butchering that word too, and misogyny. He says that women were becoming witches because they are like children. They are foolish, full of irregular desires and passions, and obsessed with filthy carnal acts. And the first woman, Eve, was twisted and contrary, so to speak, to men, he asserted. So pretty much right from the Bible onwards, women have been vilified, basically in text. Like I said earlier, it started off with, they were tolerated, women who were involved in the witchcraft, and the cunning women who healed with herbs, and who were midwives, and who basically did a doctor's job better than doctors back at that time. Yes, they were tolerated, but then obviously when this Maleficarum came out and the church got involved, and that is when all of these innocent women and a few men were basically vilified, and that was the start of the whole witch trials. And yes, that is what caused it, and that was one of my aims, was to find out what caused the witch trials, what led up to it, because I'd done research before on the witch trials. But yes, so I learned about that. And I'll give you this book to look at while I continue on. So that was actually very interesting. Very interesting. What I also learned was that witch trials, I didn't realise this either, they are still, I'll give you Christmas to look at as well. People are still being killed in large numbers across southern Africa, and their body parts are being used as charms to basically fight off evil. And people actually women are still being killed after being accused of using spells and curses to kill and harm their neighbours. If they're not being killed, and they're usually killed by being shot, hacked to death with axes and knives, beaten and burned. So pretty much it's still happening in Africa and Papua New Guinea. We just don't hear about this on the news at all. And if they aren't being killed, they're basically being driven out of their villages and basically put into witch camps, pretty much, where they're being used as forced labour for local gangs for local gang masters who are under the guardianship of the local government minister. So it's pretty much modern slavery. So yes, that was very interesting. Anyway, then I learned about the Heal the Witch Wound in this journal. I'm going to finish this today. That was actually very interesting. This was about how, where do I start? This was about how the burning times and the witch trials is negatively affecting witches today. People who use witchcraft, who are highly spiritual, who use herbs to heal, who are into homeopathic stuff, all of the all that sort of stuff. How the witch wound from the burning times is impacting us today. Very interesting read. I won't go into that. It's basically too much to talk about here, but if you are interested in, do you consider yourself a witch? You do talk to spirits, you are that way inclined, you do have these beliefs, is a very interesting book. So I reflected on that in this journal. So I've just got to finish this today. I've got a couple of chapters to go. Oh, and this book also too talks about how to basically help heal the witch wound, what it is and how to help heal it. So that was interesting. Then, so that was the successful part of my curriculum. Okay, the other things that I had planned on doing... Oh, sorry, back to witchcraft for a moment. I forgot to tell you, I also completed the course... Where is my bit of paper? Also completed the course Prediction X, Omens, Oracles and Prophecies on edX. It's a Harvard course, which you can do for free if you audit it. Love that. I've talked about that earlier. I won't go into that much. Then I went off on a bit of a tangent. I watched a documentary called The Fall of the Maya Kings, which I absolutely loved. That was just on Sky. And that got me thinking about Maya culture. So I went off on a totally different tangent and I did a course on Maya culture in the Yucatan Peninsula. This is another free edX course. This was actually very interesting as well. So I completed that. So I got sidetracked on that. So while I got sidetracked on that, I was planning to do my salad topic. I had started actually, got quite far into it, into learning about the history of salads, which is actually really interesting. One thing I learned already, I think, was that lettuce was evil. I couldn't eat lettuce, but there's a whole learning all about the myths and about what they thought was dangerous and why they couldn't eat it. It was fascinating. Anyway, so that I started doing that, and then I've been collecting recipes, bought all the salad stuff, was ready to make salads, and then was hit with a lot of stress here at home. And like many people, when I get stressed, I go for comfort food. And basically the last thing I wanted to eat was salads. That wasn't happening. So I tried several times to make salads, in the end gave up and thought, no. So I flagged this. So this has been postponed until summer. So that got put on the back benches. While I was doing all this, I also planned to do, as part of my PE topic, I was supposed to continue on with how to release trapped emotions through therapeutic shaking exercises. This was to release trauma stuck in the body. I had been doing these with all the stress around that was happening. I had a friend who died of cancer, and between that and moving house suddenly, basically I haven't really done as much as I thought I would do in this whole curriculum, in this whole spring curriculum, but that's okay. There's no pressure. I can pick up stuff that I find interesting at the time. I can drop stuff. I can postpone stuff. If stuff takes longer to do, that's okay. I'll just carry it on into future months. So I successfully procrastinated completely on this. Didn't do it at all. And I was also supposed to do my strengthening exercises, and basically I did them once, and so I successfully procrastinated them as well. So that was a major fail on that, and I've been thinking about what I can do to try and ensure that I actually stick to my plan. So I'm going to be heading back to using these in my journal, where I have my schedule, and basically I write down what I want to achieve that day, and that includes the healthy eating stuff as well, and all the other little personal stuff. It's got nothing to do with this curriculum, but other little things I want to achieve in the day. So if I write them down and tick them off, this helps makes me accountable to what I'm doing. And this has worked really well in the past, but I've dropped it off when amongst all the stress. I just couldn't cope with this as well as everything else, so it dropped off a couple of months ago. So I'm hoping that doing this every day from December onwards, will help make me accountable so that I actually do what I want to do. It's actually been very interesting, because I've noticed that I have gravitated towards doing the study stuff, the intellectual stuff, the reading, the documentaries, the courses. I've gravitated towards that a lot more than the actual topics that I had, which required me to actually do stuff physically. I think I'd planned to do some sort of painting as well, never got to that either. And any other stuff like that, I just don't seem to be doing it. So I thought that was actually very interesting. I'm gravitating towards more of the intellectualized side of my curriculum than the more activity-based side of stuff. Anyway, I digress. So I actually found a lot of recipes and stuff on the salad. So that was all good. So that can be put away, and we'll pick that up in January or February. So in the meantime, I went on another tangent as well. It has been such gorgeous weather here, and I thought I didn't use a lot of spring notebooks, because if you have been watching my journaling videos, in all of my notebooks I've been doing daily journaling in them as well. But I hadn't used a lot of my spring notebooks, and I was thinking a lot of flowers. I love flowers. I've always loved flowers, and I would love to, if I had my way, do a floristry course. So my first thought was, okay, can I find a free floristry course online? I started one, I can't even remember who it was with now. Allison Courses. Anyway, it was called the Diploma of Floristry or something like that. I think Diploma of Floristry is pretty much, I think they're reaching. I wouldn't call it a Diploma of Floristry at all. It was more like an introduction to floristry. Anyway, so I started that. That was cool. Loving it. The first part of that course was to do about the history of flower arranging. But it was only a really short, very brief run through of it. It pretty much just told me nothing. It was just, in Egypt they did this, in Greece they did this, in Rome they did this, and that was pretty much it. And I thought, nah, I want something more thorough about this. I love history. I want to learn about the history of flower arranging. So I've put the history of floristry course on hold, and I have been reading this. And sometimes the best books are the oldest books. So I'm learning about the history of flower arranging, and this is one of the oldest books in the library, and it goes right back to ancient Egypt and ancient Greece and Indian flower arranging and Japanese flower arranging and the history, the Edwardian era, the Victorian era, right through. So I'm having fun with this. I have only just started because I have only just found this book. So this is what I'm working on, one of my extra little subjects. So I'm doing that. Then, since I moved to my new place, there has been lots of gardens around. I've now got my old place. We didn't have much of a garden. There were a few trees around the border of my place, but my new place, we've got, I don't know if you can see, we've got the back garden. We've got trees right along the border, and then we've got a huge garden out the back. And I've been seeing so many birds that I've never actually seen before. My desk, which you can't see because had to shut that because of the light. The light was awful. Basically, I see birds tottering up. Basically, it's funny, I always thought that they would fly. I thought that if they were, that I've figured out that they live here. And I always assumed that, well, this is what I would do as a bird. I would fly from there up to the back garden. But no, there's been one little, I think it's a blackbird, and it pretty much jumps, it totters the whole way up, and I can pretty much follow it up. And what's been funny is my Christmas tree, which is here. I've actually had the Christmas tree lights on, and I've actually seen it outside that window watching the Christmas lights. I thought that was so funny. Anyway, I digress. So I decided to learn about birds. And I'm going right back to the beginning. I'm doing several things at once with this, and again, I know I have taken on so much, but I'm just fascinated with this. I just love it. So we're starting with this journal, which has got one of our native birds on the front, which is oh, that doesn't tell me what the bird is. Anyway, so I've started right back to the beginning, which is The Secret Life of Birds, and this goes right back to birds, basically what the Bible thought about birds, and how actually at the earliest period that actually birds were considered fish, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm not going to be reading this whole thing because it's huge and I'll be here until next year. I'm just going to be picking my way through the topics that interest me and working my way through that. So while I'm doing that, I have also been learning about my native birds, and this is some of the stuff that I have printed out. I know a lot of you who are into curriculums, you like to handwrite stuff. Yes, I do handwrite